Season 4 is coming to a close, and we've got a developer update blog to let us know what's going to be happening in Season 5. It's a season without a new hero and no new PvE. Let's see what Aaron Keller has in store for us. He says, as Season 4 ends, I'd like to take a look at the game's balance. This season, we saw a wide selection of heroes get played, and for the most part, the game felt fairly balanced. From a win rate perspective, Seasons 3 and 4 were some of the most balanced in recent Overwatch history. With this season in mind, let's look at 3 different topics from Season 4 and talk about how they will change in Season 5 and beyond. Specifically, I'd like to go over heroes like Junkerqueen and Lifeweaver, one-shots, and crowd control abilities in 5v5. Just the mention of that is making me nervous. Let's see what Aaron has to say. There was a few standouts from a tuning perspective in Season 4. In the mid-season patch, Junkerqueen was given a series of buffs, and she really started to dominate. Her win rate popped up by about 5%, and she went from being one of the lowest picked tanks to one of the highest. For most skill tiers, Queen and Reinhardt were the 2 most picked tanks for the latter half of the season. However, at Masters and above, Queen is far and away the most picked tank. One of the big changes that we made was to increase the healing received from her passive. We like this addition to her playstyle, but it makes Queen too survivable, so we'll be reducing the health she receives from commanding Shout from 200 to 150 to compensate. We'll also be increasing the cost of her ult by a small amount since she is getting it at a faster rate than before the mid-season changes. Guys, I'm really starting to wonder if the devs are ever going to get tired of this balance merry-go-round that they're on. Spoiler alert, they won't, because it should be obvious to everyone, including them. They surely know this. Junkerqueen is a very high skill floor character, which is to say, you need a lot of skill first before you even begin to access what her kit actually does, as opposed to other characters that push a button and deploy a shield. Junkerqueen needs to cycle her abilities in the correct way, hit shots, and is heavily punished for bad targeting, bad mechanics, or bad play in general, so much so that forcing her to have a higher win rate at lower tiers is kind of a mistake, in my opinion. Because what ultimately happens is she becomes a Giga Tank must pick at higher tiers. And on top of that, she does also have a high skill ceiling. So similar to characters like Sojourn or Widowmaker, the value potential begins in exponential ramp once you start to meet that skill floor requirement. There would be ways for them to solve the massive skill chasm between the player base, particularly the pros who are going to have a very important tournament coming up, probably don't want Junkerqueen to be 100% must pick, while also making her more viable for the average player. If you could, let's say, remove some of the easier options from the hero roster so that a harder option sometimes can be picked or be viable for the situation. Yep, I've asked for that for years, and I will continue to ask for it for years now that we don't even have a PvE on the horizon. What else can they make other than more hardcore formats for the dedicated hardcore players so that the balanced team doesn't have to boomerang the character's potential just to mix up and create a false sense of content in the game? Next subject, Aaron says, Lifeweaver is a really dynamic hero. Some of the plays that people have pulled off with him during Season 4 were pretty astonishing. However, he's not powerful enough to be a solid pick for most players. Previously, we stated that we would like there to be a reason to pick new heroes over others in the roster. This is still a goal of ours for new heroes. We want them to bring something new to the table. However, at the moment, we are looking for the best way to bring Lifeweaver to a baseline. Once people are playing him more, we will get a cleaner read on the character. Players will either start utilizing the varied parts of his kit, or we can start looking into adding something else to it. In Season 5, there will be quite a few changes, mostly buffs, coming to Lifeweaver. We'll have specific details in the patch notes, but players can expect an increase to his healing and damage output, a heal on life grip, a slightly reduced hitbox, and some quality of life changes to pedal platform. We'll continue to monitor both Junkerqueen and Lifeweaver to make additional changes if necessary. As a support player myself, I'm a little disappointed how long we're gonna have to wait for the added utility they talked about, and in fact, it almost sounds like Aaron's saying they're shelving that almost to collect data on just like minor buffs. Give him some cool utility to use, man. I think it's really a shame that they aren't moving faster to just try out some wacky ability. I think his abilities should add more positive benefits to his team, because as it turned out, pure repositioning isn't enough impact, at least not in Overwatch 2 with 5v5 and a very deathmatchy style shooter game. The next subject is about one-shots. Aaron says the community has also voiced concerns over the number of one-shots from both Widowmaker and Hanzo. We'd like to reduce the frequency of these in-game, as well as shore up some of the extreme sightlines in some of our maps. Ooh, does that mean they're adding cover to maybe like Colosseo or something? That would would be pretty cool. I feel every time they add cover positions to help you traverse the map, the game just feels better on those maps, in my experience. I don't think there's a single piece of cover added in Overwatch 2 where I'm like, wow, the map played better before they added this. So I really welcome that, and that's maybe a silent hero in the Overwatch 2 map design. Now, on Widowmaker and Hanzo, Aaron says Widow's damage fall off will change from 70 to 100 meters to 40 to 60 meters. So that's the range where it begins to fall off and then completely falls off. Massive, massive nerf. And for reference, the old value was such a far distance, you almost never got into an engagement where you would feel it happen. Like, there was only a couple maps in the entire game where the old fall off would have prevented a one-shot kill. Now with this new fall off range, it's gonna happen all the time. Like, look at the difference. It used to begin falling off at 70, and now it's going to have its maximum fall off damage at 60. A giga nerf to her range. Okay. On top of that, Aaron says the damage fall off scaler will also increase from 30% to 50%. So that means even within this effective range, there's certain breakpoints like in the middle where you're not going to be able to one-shot or be one-shot against a Widowmaker, meaning you pretty much can walk in certain sightlines now with almost no fear at certain ranges when you're far enough away. We'll need to see the Season 5 build of the game to properly test this, but what this means is for different breakpoints of health pools like 200 or 250, the full damage of a Widowmaker headshot fully charged deals 300 damage normally when it's in full effectiveness. Then within now 40 to 60 meters, it's going to pretty rapidly fall off. And at 60 plus meters, it's only going to do 150, only able to one-shot a tracer. So 250 health point characters as well as natural armor characters like Brigitte and Torbjorn have a lot of ranges where they're just going to be able to tank a one-shot, meaning Widow's going to have to be very careful about the type of targets she goes for because many of them just won't be viable options. And if you don't hit that one-shot as Widow, well, what does that character really do? All right, Aaron says she will still have the ability to one-shot 200 health heroes at 50 meters or less. So that's halfway between that range. So he actually does specify the actual effect of the quick, rapid drop-off now. But further than that, it will no longer be a killing blow. The effect this is going to have on the meta is quite massive, in my opinion. And I think a lot of times, Widow is going to have to go at a character like Ashe more rather than, like, let's say Ana, who's typically in the backline. There's a lot of maps where Ana is going to be outside of that effective range, or Zen is another example. These supports that like to fire from the back usually were good prey for Widowmaker, but if she can't one-shot them, they're probably going to get away. And so Widow's going to have to be more about dueling the DPS and only, certain DPSs she's even good at fighting anyway. I think this is a giga nerf, and they probably going to have to revert her health back again to 200, which she's not saying they're doing. So Widow's going to be a really tough pick, especially since she already struggled up against very easy value tank line brawler characters like Reaper and Mei. Well, now there's certain ranges as they close the distance she can't even kill if she hits the shot. Widowmaker, just like Junkerqueen, another one of these really sharp characters that would benefit from a different format as opposed to heavy-handed balancing. Next subject, we're talking about Hanzo now, since we're smashing down one-shots in the game, it seems. Hanzo will receive a slight nerf to his damage so that he is no longer able to one-shot 250 health heroes, so just double everything I just said about those up-close brawler characters who close the distance. Hanzo was kind of nuts in Brawl Mirrors because of his ability to do exactly this job. Now he'll probably just not even be viable at all. Aaron says his Sonic arrow will also be more recognizable by the enemy team. The intent here is to reduce his kills that feel like they come out of nowhere. That seems pretty fair. If there's some sort of sound indication, let's say, that you hear the Sonic arrow, I think that seems somewhat fair, or at least being made aware that you're detected, just like you are when Sombra is detected when invisible. Why does she get to do that, but other characters don't? I'd like that change. He closes in saying, we are constantly discussing the nature of one-shots in Overwatch 2 and whether they are healthy for the game in general. But one of the new characters you added had a railgun. What? Man, it's almost like the devs lost years of development time and we're developing this game in real time. Oh man, guys, the blog doesn't get better, by the way. I've already read this. All right, the next subject. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. CC is coming back. Lastly, I'd like to talk a bit about crowd control abilities in-game. When we launched Overwatch 2, we made some significant changes to our combat model. The biggest was the shift from 6v6 to 5v5. A part of that change was to remove most of the crowd control abilities from our damage and support heroes. And in my opinion, damage was fun enough as it is. I am totally fine with supports having CC. Perhaps too big of a conversation for this moment. Aaron says, overall, we think that this was a positive change for the game. At times, the original game felt like you were in a pinball machine, but we have a lot of high mobility heroes in the roster, and a team can't always rely on their tank to take care of them. So we're softening our approach here. And guys, haven't they already made this clear by reintroducing a stun on Brigida? Thought that was kind of obvious. Why do we even need to continue down this road? Well, let's see what they got in plan. He says, we don't want to return to the state of the game that it was in previously, like in Overwatch 1, I assume he means, but we can feel like there is room for more CC, especially soft CC in our lineup. We'll be making changes to both Mei and Cassidy for Season 5 with this in mind. Mei's endothermic blaster will be updated. The primary fire will still slow targets, but it will build up to an effect that will apply a much larger slow for 1.5 seconds. For players of the original game, this will feel familiar to the way her old weapon worked. Yes, one of the most aggravating things in the entire game of Overwatch 1. Mei working up to a bigger freeze is now back, but not to fully freeze you, just to horribly slow you. I gotta be honest, guys, I don't get the difference. Considering how high the DPS is on it anyway, does dying to the freeze ray where you can barely move feel much better than being turned into a full icicle and then getting headshot? In my opinion, that was a better mechanic. The souped up freeze ray DPS that has multi-cleave on it, making Mei very forgiving in rush comps, I think is a much worse to play against mechanic than when she used to be able to turn one target into a popsicle, because back then, if the enemy cycled their health pool or moved away from the freeze and you started to freeze a new target, well, you lost progress on that full freeze, and you really had to punish a mistake in order to get a full freeze on an enemy. And then you did have to hit a headshot, usually to get the kill, whereas now you don't need to do that ever. You should just full freeze beam, and it's a much dumber playstyle, doesn't feel any better to play against. In fact, it might even feel worse. So if they're even going to step foot in this direction, I wish they would just jump back and revert it. I can't believe I'm saying that. If she's going to be an obnoxious hero to play against anyway, make it feel the best for all parties. And I just think the devs listen to very specific feedback, and maybe because the general player base doesn't realize how annoying the cleave freeze is, and it's just like diehard players that really know that it's getting abused, that's not like in the tip of everyone's tongue, and instead the full freeze is what people talk about. But I feel like we're just taking opinions from the Battle.net forums instead of actually how the real game ends up functioning. By the way, Mei has been a pretty strong character for a while now, so flat buffs will just make that even better. And here's the thing, guys, this isn't even the craziest thing in this section. It gets worse. All right, now on to Cassidy. Cassidy's magnetic grenade will also get updated to deal less damage and apply a slow as well as a hindered effect, a new status effect that prevents movement abilities from being used. Guys, how is this any better than the very quick instant stun from Overwatch 1? This just seems worse, doesn't it? Am I crazy here? In the same way, and maybe even more so than everything I just said about Mei, it applies to Cassidy, who, yes, while you could stun and fan the hammer, that was kind of lame, but stunning and needing to headshot, that was fine because the animation on the character was bobbling, so it took some skill to do that. But now a hindered status effect means a lot of characters won't be able to dodge away, which you kind of could have done in Overwatch 1. Like, the timing window was punishing for the Cassidy player. Now it's more forgiving, and you'll have more time to line up subsequent shots. Remember how good Sojourn's area of effect slow was? Well, that's what Magnade now does to an individual target. And while, yeah, the big and free easy damage was kind of oppressive, I don't know that this feels any better. And it's certainly going to mean flanker characters are going to be a lot worse. Like, you realize Magnade has like a pseudo hack effect now, right? Like, Tracer and Genji can't use their movement abilities to escape. Does that include double jump? I'm not entirely sure. And they were worried so much about crowd control creep in Overwatch 1, rightfully so, maybe a way to ban out some of those options from stacking on top of each other in the same team comp where you could pick like 6 stuns. Maybe that could help the situation. But now that we have 5 characters, even still so many years later, Cassidy and Mei are a natural pairing because they're both medium to close range brawler characters. So now the potential of what was already a pretty viable duo, even more viable now that Hanzo's getting nerfed, that they just said, you've got the amped up slow from Mei along with the slow and anti-movement escape from the Magnade. Your ability to lock things down, it's no different now. And in fact, it might even just be worse in some ways, depending on how long these status effects effects last when stacked on top of each other. Chain stunning in Overwatch 1 sucked, but I don't know how this is any better. And in fact, I think it just plays worse. Like, just revert it to Overwatch 1 on both of these characters. I just feel like this entire CC section is a big circle, sort of like the PvE circle, right? Like, just imagine the laps that they're running internally to try something and then revert it back and then do it again and then go over and over and over and over again. Man, this is really rough. This is a really rough blog post to read, guys. This is not what we wanted to see. It's like, refocus back on the PvP. Okay, great. We're PvP players anyway. Fine. We're going to shelf the PvE. Let's just get dedicated PvP content. Oh, they're just going to play crowd control roulette. They don't want the game to feel like a pinball machine, but instead you'll feel like you're stuck in molasses and there's more hacks in the game, less abilities to move. You know, at the launch of Overwatch 2, people were pretty hyped to be able to play a character like Genji again for 5 minutes. It's got to be that metal rank players just absolutely hate playing against mobility or something. I really don't understand it, because for me, I love mobility in the game, and I think a lot of diehard, especially higher level players do as well. I'm curious what you guys think. Like, am I speaking out of school on this one? Personally, I'm kind of happy with supports having some CC, but damage also having supportive type kit, I think, is a bit of a mistake, because it begins to allow the roles to combo too many of them together. Since you only have one tank, the fact that multiple tanks have CC means it doesn't really make a difference. You're only going to get so much CC from that role. But when all the roles start to have viable CC, well, that's when you start to get the Overwatch 1 problem, where you develop these comps where you can just button mash to chain CC a target. And I don't see how this doesn't do that. I will say this though, since Kiriko is one of my best heroes in the game, add as many bad disable debuffs that you can, because it just makes Suzu more viable. A big percentage of my team's living or dying is going to be in the hands of the support to cleanse all these obnoxious status effects. Ha, you never saw that happening, internet. You thought the immortality potion from Kiriko was gonna break the game. Turns out it's saving us from the CC apocalypse. Okay, Aaron closes the blog post and saying, we're going to move slowly and deliberately here. They're going to move slowly, guys. Kind of like they have the hindered status effect. Oh, brother. I really appreciate that choice of words, Aaron. And if we cross a line, we will pull back. And I think they will. I mean, they've got time on their hands now that they canceled half the game. On top of these changes, we'll also be making some tweaks to several other heroes in Season 5. We can't wait for you to see them when the patch notes go live, as well as other fun things we have coming to the game that season. As always, thanks for reading, and I'll see you in game. All right, guys, I know I was pretty whiny in this video, but can you blame me with the state of the game right now? And this is the blog post we get. But looking to Season 5, let's take a look back at the roadmap. We'll be getting a cinematic reveal, summer games, a 5v5 mini comp season, On Fire coming back. And remember, they were reworking how that worked, so we're not really even sure what form it's going to take. A creator workshop mode, which I believe and assume is going to be sort of a highlighted creator workshop game mode in its own playlist, which maybe isn't as impressive as it could be, but is better than nothing, especially when discoverability is so tricky, and there's a big percentage of players that I think are just never going to navigate in the custom games browser. I know I don't really feel like reading through a list. I just want to press a button and join the queue. But the major points for Season 5 are Mischief and Magic, which looks like a mobile game is what a lot of people said. I almost like have so much copium that after they cancel most of the PvE that they wouldn't dare make a mobile game. Surely that can't be it. Also, Aaron said that there's things coming into the game, but with no tag on what that is. Let's just say that's the theme, okay? Mischief and Magic, which reminds me of like traditional Warcraft, very colorful medieval theme. I'm gonna love the battle pass for that one, I'm sure. The top line item we're getting is Questwatch, a new limited time event, which based on the image looks like an RPG of sorts. It looks like an overview map of a JRPG or Zelda or something like that. So we'll see what they have cooking here. I think the theming of the Star Watch event was basically perfect. The setting, the heroes, the voice lines, the skins. The only thing that wasn't good is the game. Missed it by that much. Let's see if Questwatch can impress us in Season 5. Let me know what you think about today's dev blog, guys, in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.